Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're doing more than just looking at the past. We're digging into a history that was deliberately locked away, a story that was intentionally wiped from the books. We're going to uncover the hard evidence of incredible civilizations and amazing triumphs that were systematically hidden from all of us.
So let's start with the story most of us got in school. You know the one. A story that, as all the evidence shows, wasn't just missing a few pages here and there. No, it was a calculated distortion, a narrative that was twisted on purpose, for a very specific and pretty dark reason.
For hundreds of years, the main story presented Africa as the quote-unquote dark continent, a place with no real history, no major achievements. But here's the thing, that wasn't just some accidental oversight, it was a myth, and it was a myth that was carefully built to justify exploitation.
But the evidence on the ground? Well, that tells a completely different story. And our first piece of proof isn't in a book. It's written in massive, mortarless stone walls in southern Africa.
Okay, so look at this, because this is where it gets really wild. When European explorers first stumbled upon Great Zimbabwe, they just couldn't accept that Africans could have built it. Their minds were so closed off to the idea that they invented these crazy stories about ancient Phoenicians or the Queen of Sheba. Why? Because the reality that the local Shona people had engineered this incredible city completely shattered their worldview.
And this slide really drives the point home. This was no isolated kingdom. Great Zimbabwe was a global powerhouse. I mean, think about what this means. Archaeologists are finding Chinese porcelain and Persian glass inside these walls. This was not some lost city in the middle of nowhere. It was a bustling international trade hub connected to the rest of the world. The proof of its African origins was so clear, so undeniable, that the colonial Rhodesian government literally suppressed the archaeological reports to keep their false story alive.
And let's see how this story just keeps building across the continent. Because Great Zimbabwe, it wasn't a one-off. At the same time and even centuries before, other massive empires of incredible wealth and deep, deep intellect were thriving in West and East Africa.
So let's head over to West Africa. There, you've got the Mali Empire, this incredibly sophisticated state controlling huge trade routes. And at its head was Mansa Musa, who, by just about any calculation, was probably the richest person in all of human history. To give you an idea of his wealth, on his pilgrimage to Mecca, he gave away so much gold in Cairo that he single-handedly crashed the price of gold there for more than 10 years.
But his empire's wealth wasn't just about gold. It was rich in knowledge. The city of Timbuktu was a world-famous center for learning. Its Sankore University had libraries filled with hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, books on everything from astronomy and medicine to law, and it drew in scholars from all over the world. This just completely blows up the myth of an uneducated continent. This was a place where knowledge was created, treasured, and shared.
All right, now let's jump over to East Africa. Here we have the Aksumite Empire. It was so powerful and influential that ancient writers put it on their shortlist of the 4 great powers of the entire world, right alongside Rome, Persia, and China. They weren't just a regional player, they were a global superpower, controlling vital trade routes in the Red Sea.
Okay, so we've seen empires of stone and gold. Now let's turn to the ultimate proof of military genius and the unbreakable human will to be free. We are talking about a revolution so shocking, so world-changing, that the historian Michel-Rolph Trouillot said it was literally unthinkable to the powers that be of the time, and because it was unthinkable, it was deliberately silenced.
For 13 absolutely brutal years, the enslaved people in the French colony of Saint-Domingue fought for their freedom. And get this, they didn't just fight their French slave masters. They successfully defeated invasions by both the Spanish and the British, 2 of the other global superpowers of the time.
The absolute climax of this whole struggle came in 1802. Napoleon Bonaparte, the guy who was basically the master of Europe, was furious about this. So he sent his best troops, battle-hardened veterans who had conquered Egypt and Italy, with one simple order: crush this rebellion and bring back slavery.
Just look at these numbers. It's not even close. The Haitian defenders were outnumbered more than 7-1. They were up against some of the best-equipped, most experienced soldiers on the planet. For the French, this was supposed to be a walk in the park.
But it wasn't a walk in the park. Not even a little bit. In just 3 weeks of fighting, those defenders inflicted over 1,500 casualties on Napoleon's elite army. It was a strategic catastrophe for the French. The battle absolutely shattered their morale, and it proved that taking back Haiti was going to be basically impossible. This was a turning point.
So this brings us to the biggest question of all, right? After seeing all this, the incredible architecture, the mind-boggling wealth, the intellectual centers, the brilliant military victories, why? Why were these histories so completely and systematically buried? Why weren't we taught this stuff?
Well, the short answer is it wasn't an accident. It wasn't some simple mistake or oversight. The sources are crystal clear on this. The erasure, the silence, that was the whole point. You see, to build a global system based on something as horrific as chattel slavery and colonialism, you first have to build a story that makes it seem okay. And that story required a version of history where Africans had achieved nothing, had built nothing, and were incapable of governing themselves. The true history of achievement had to be erased for the system of exploitation to work. And the methods they used were comprehensive and they were brutal. We're talking about so-called scientific racism in universities to twist the evidence, to the actual physical destruction of cultural sites, burning libraries and artifacts, and spinning massive propaganda campaigns to reframe the Haitian Revolution not as a fight for liberty, but as a so-called savage race war. And that really leaves us with this powerful thought from the very historian who diagnosed this problem. History isn't just a passive recording of things that happened. It's an active creation, and power is what determines who gets to hold the microphone and which stories get told.
So the real takeaway here is this. Recovering this silence past isn't just about, adding a few new facts to an old textbook. It's about understanding how power has always manufactured the stories we tell ourselves, and how those manufactured stories continue to shape the world we live in right here, right now.